Hi guys, welcome. And who dat? I'm Joe, and today I'm just going to be talking about the upcoming draft. And I wanted to present the question of what do you expect when it comes to your draft picks? And it's something that I'm going to talk about. It's not that important, it's just one of them things. We're in the middle of a losing season for our beloved, bless you boys in black and gold, the New Orleans Saints. And not a lot to really think about. The last four games are ahead of us here, and looks like we're down a quarterback. We're down so many other players. We don't have a lot of really good players left on the team. We're in the middle of a rebuild right now. And so I've been focusing a lot on the draft and a lot of opinions out there. A lot of people think we need a top 10 pick. I don't think we need a top 10 pick. If we had a top 10 pick, I'd probably try to trade out of it and acquire extra picks. Why? Because the Saints need so much. And when you get to a top 10 pick, it's got me thinking about players on our team right now that are top 10 picks. Well, we've got one, Chase Young. He was a number two overall pick and by the Washington football team at the time or whatever. And Chase Young's a good player. He's a fine starter, gets a lot of pressures on the quarterback. But at the end of every year, when you look at those final numbers, you think to yourself, the Chase Young was a bust. Not really a bust. Just when you think about taking him second overall, and then you can only get 7 sacks, 7.5 sacks at best in a single season, then you start to think, yeah, it borderline bust. And it's only because he's a number two overall pick. If Chase Young were the 15th overall pick, then everybody would say he's a decent pro. You expect a lot from your first rounders, but you expect a whole bunch from your top 10 picks. So right now we got a number two overall guy on our team, and even though a lot of us feel like he's a pretty good player, we feel like we need more production from the ends. If we re-sign Chase Young, are you going to re-sign him to a $15 million a year contract because he was a second overall pick? Or are you going to pay this guy what he's worth as a pretty good player? I mean, better than average, maybe. I don't see a lot when it comes to stopping the run. I don't see a lot when it comes to sacks. I just hear that every now and then he gets the best of a player and has a good game, puts up 10 pressures in a game. Okay, great. Can you do that every game against everybody? No, he doesn't. And as far as sacks go, that's what everybody's going to look at if you're a defensive lineman. They're going to want to know if you're stopping the run and getting sacks. So it made me think about the draft picks and what you should expect from your draft picks. And I think a first round pick, when it's all said and done, should be a starter. If you're a top 10 pick, everyone expects you to not only be a starter, but you need to be one of the best in the league. It doesn't always happen that way. Example, Chase Young. So what should you expect? So I've got a little list here. I love my list, and I've got nothing else to talk about except the Saints and the upcoming draft. I'm not going to get into I'll make a whole video about Jake Hayner versus Spencer Rattler. Give me a break. Neither one of them's the future of the team. That's how I really feel. It's interesting to see. It'd be nice to see Jake Hayner start a game, finish a game, and let's see what happens. But I've seen enough of Jake Hayner in the preseason and in spot duty to feel like at best he's going to be Derek Carr. He can manage a game. Maybe he can move around in the pocket better than Carr. Maybe he can avoid sacks better than Spencer Rattler. But when it's all said and done, I don't think Hayner's the future. I don't think Rattler's the future. So we can have these conversations about the Saints currently. I'm not even sure who's on their damn roster right now because every other day they're making moves. And it's not really until, the weekend before you find out who's active, who's playing, who's on the practice squad, who got moved. There's so many players coming in and out right now. It's hard for me to keep up. I think Tano Passanio has to be active this week, or he's on IR the rest of the year. And he's healthy and practicing. So lots of different things going on with the Saints right now. I'm going to focus on this stuff. And yeah, we're certainly going to talk about the roster later on at the end of the season. When we finally put Carr on IR or whatever this dance we're doing right now finishes itself up, and we'll see what we're dealing with. I have a video that breaks down the Saints roster as it's going to stand with players under contract next year. I've shown you the roster with the exiting players gone, and we did a video about position of need and what would be, the most important positions for the Saints to address. This is just going to be focusing on what you should expect from your draft picks. And let's pull it up. Here's my nice list. First round and second round picks. You should get a starter. If you don't get an immediate starter, you should get a future starter. And at worst case, a guy that's in a heavy rotation. So, first round pick, second round pick. Starter, yeah, that's what you expect. Even my second round picks. There's only so many players on a football team, and the salary cap only allows you to do so much. The salary cap is set up in a way where you almost can't have a great draft. Let's say you pick 7 players in a draft, and all 7 players turn out to be fantastic. 4 years from now, you're going to have to pay those 7 guys, and you're going to have to pay them top dollar amount to keep them. And the salary cap is set up in a way where that's not going to happen. You make a great draft like the 2017 draft where we end up with 6 players in the top 3 rounds, and all 6 of them are great. And look what happened. We didn't keep Trey Hendrickson because we didn't want to pay him that much. We didn't keep Marcus Williams because we didn't want to pay him that much. You end up losing half your team because you can't afford to keep them. So the salary cap kind of restricts you from having a great draft. No, it's ridiculous because you've got a budget. We had a quarterback in Drew Brees that could have made 35 million a year if he'd have just left the Saints at any point in his Saints career. At any point when his contract was up, he could have gone and signed with another team and made a hell of a lot more money. I think the most we ever paid Drew Brees in one year was like $27.5 million. Drew Brees always capped his salary at around 25 million. He gave us the Tom Brady deal. Tom Brady did the same thing. It's the only way you're going to draft a franchise quarterback and keep him on your team and actually have a team around him that's competitive. At some point, these great players have to cap their salary and say, no, no, no. I realize that if you pay me 40 million a year, that's not going to leave enough money for a team. Nobody's worth that much money. Personally, I think there should be a limit to how much these players get paid. And I know that goes crazy against my beliefs and unions and worker rights and everything else, right? One of my cats needs rescuing. Hold on. Okay. Hi, Sam. All right. So, yeah, if we didn't get the hometown discount from Drew Brees, if he didn't cap himself at 25 million, I don't know how much success this team would have had in the later years with Drew Brees. The way the salary cap is, you have to figure out a way. You have to maintain players on your team that are good, but not expensive. And it's a rotation. There's a You're going to have to let someone go that you don't need that somebody else is willing to pay more money for. Nobody wants to give up their great players, and at the same time, if you're 7 deep on the offensive line, you can't be paying 2 guys that aren't starting caliber money. I mean, building a franchise team, building a good franchise is more than just grabbing a bunch of great players. You hope You hope you get a guy that's cheap for 4 years and he plays out of his mind, but then after 4 years, you have to re-sign him. So if you get starters out of your first round pick and your second round pick, and you can get two of those picks every year, first rounder, second rounder every year, after 4 years, you've got yourself eight starters and you're having to re-sign your second rounders from that first year because the 4 years is up. You have to re-sign that second rounder, and you have to figure out if you're going to extend into a fifth year with your first rounder. So as soon as a 4 year span is up, you might have eight starters, but now you're having to pay top dollar. You were paying top draft dollar before. So who do you keep? If you have two starters every year in your first rounder and second rounder, and you go 4 years in a row and you acquire eight starters, now two of them you got to start paying top dollar. The next year you're going to have to pay the other two top dollar. They're great players. So yeah, you need to hit on the draft all over the place. You need to hit on late round picks with starters, but eventually you got to pay those guys. And then you hope you have enough money in free agency that you can actually fill in the gaps. Free agency for this team is usually okay, we've got holes, we need quality depth, we need backups, and we go and we sign guys for $1 million, $2 million a year, and they end up giving us 2 or 3 years, and then it's like Isaac Yadam. You find this treasure who comes in and for 1 year is a great starter. He's forced to start. He looks great. And then guess what? The next year, he's too expensive. We got to let him go. It's a balancing act. You're never going to have a team that's your guys for 10 years in a row. There's always going to be doors opening and closing. So I expect starters out of my first round pick and my second round pick. And if not a starter, then at least a guy that's going to start. Let's say you draft a quarterback in the first 2 rounds this year. He might not start ahead of Derek Carr next year, but he's going to be the future starter kind of deal. Or let's say with the case like Brian Bassi. We draft him in the first round, but technically for his first 2 years, he's not a starter. He's not good enough against the run. We have to start Nathan Shepard at the three tech. And then Brian Bassi comes in as a heavy rotational guy. He comes in on pass rushing situations. This year, we're gonna we're trying to have Brzee play more downs, and he's not getting any better against the run. So is Brzee a bust as a first round pick because he's not technically a starter? Well, he's proven his worth as a pass rush specialist. So he's definitely in the rotation. And you're selling yourself short if you don't have Brzee rushing the passer on obvious passing situations. So Brzee a good first round pick. He's fine for me. He's in a heavy rotation now, even if he doesn't ever get great against the run. If he continues to put up 6, 7 sacks a year, you got yourself a nice piece. I call that a heavy rotation slash future starter. Now, you go to a guy like second round pick Isaiah Foskey. Now, to me, this is a bust. You didn't get a starter. You hope it's a future starter, but in order to prove that, he's got to be in a heavy rotation. He can't even get in a heavy rotation. I mean, he's a healthy scratch most of the time. I think he played 3 or 4 snaps this past week. Yeah, after 2 years, a second round pick that's not even in the heavy rotation, that's a bust to me. And I don't expect Foskey to grow from year 2 to year 3. I think we've seen what we're going to see from Foskey. That was a bust. That was a miss. A guy like Trevor Penning, first round draft pick. Is he a starter? Well, we tried it early on. It didn't work. Is he a future starter? Well, we're hoping. Can he get in the rotation? First 2 years, we couldn't even have him out there blocking on field goal attempts. But here he is in his third year, and he's thrust into the starting role. And right now, he's adequate. So, is he a bust? Well, first round picks, you expect them to be not only starters, but really good starters. But hey, if you can get a guy who starts then all is not lost. But I feel like we can improve at that position. So you know, borderline bust there. But at least he's starting. Another one, I'm so sorry, Sam. I scared Sam. I'm, I've lost my train of thought. So I'm going to go with third and fourth round picks now. Future starters, that would be great. If you can get a guy in the third or fourth round who can come in and immediately start or is so good that in a couple of years he becomes your starter, that's really good stuff. Third and fourth round pick should be in a rotation. And when I say heavy rotation, it all depends on what position you're talking about. But like if you're an offensive lineman and we get you in the third or fourth round, like Teron Armstead, and you end up becoming a starter, third round pick who ends up a starter, and he's a good starter, home run. If you get a fourth round pick and a guy like Jari Evans and he becomes an instant starter and an instant Pro Bowler, I mean, knocked it out of the park. But I kind of expect your third or your fourth round guy to at least be heavy rotation, meaning getting on the field on the defensive line or, a sixth offensive lineman, or at the very, very least, if you're a third and fourth round pick, a primary backup, meaning, well, let's look at Nick Saldiveri. He was a fourth round pick. Nick Saldiveri was a fourth round pick. He needs some time to develop. And after a couple of years, if we can count on him as a primary backup, and he's worth that, play multiple positions on the offensive line, and can come in and start for you for a couple of games and do good, then okay, you're good with that. Third and fourth round pick, Nick Saldiveri. We need you to start 4 games. Go in there and start. Well, the first couple of games, the guy tried to start. We pulled him 1 game. He was pretty bad 1 game. The last couple of times he started, he was okay. He got a little better. But this guy's borderline. He needs to show me next year that he's either good enough to start or we don't worry about it if he has to go in and play a couple of games because he was hurt most of this year, Saldiveri, and he had his chance to play and wasn't good enough to stay on the field. He seems to have gotten a little better, but that's what I'm talking about. Saldiveri to me is a borderline bust. And the main reason is because of how we acquired him. Fourth round pick, fine. But we traded the next year's fourth round pick to move up in the fourth round and get Saldiveri at the beginning of that fourth round. So we traded our fourth round pick to move up and next year's fourth round pick. Last year, when we picked in the first round and second round, and then we had to wait till the fifth round before we picked again, yeah, we didn't have a fourth round pick because of Nick Saldiveri. So we could have an extra fourth round pick on this team. We could have drafted a player in the fourth round last year, but instead, we get Nick Saldiveri. Now that's when the pick of Saldiveri leans towards a bust for me. When you're giving up 2 draft picks and a good one, a fourth rounder, to move up and get this guy who you were blown away because he could play center in a pinch at the Senior Bowl. The guy ain't never played center for the Saints yet, and he can barely get on the field as a left guard. He was we were flirting with him being our starter at left guard, and then when he finally does hit the field, we have to pull him. Now, like I said, the last 2 games he played, he was okay. You hope. Because at the end of this rookie contract for Nick Saldiveri, yeah, I don't want to resign him to $5-6 million. The guy hasn't proven he can be a starter in this league. I'd take my chances on re-signing Lucas Patrick if I'm going to pay somebody $4 or $5 million. I don't know what Saldiveri is going to get when his rookie contract ends, but unless he can learn how to play center and actually challenge to be a starting offensive lineman on this team, it's a bust. Now, if he just stays like he is and we ask him to start 4 games a year and everything works out fine, then okay, I'm fine with that as a fourth round pick. Once the contract's up, where do you pay him? So, yeah, the salary cap's maddening. And a lot of this stuff has to work. It has to work every year for you. You have to get good backups in the third and fourth round. Guys that, hey, Sometimes it happens. We have to let a guard go, a starting guard go. He gets out of our price range. Nick Saliveri has to step it up. That's what I expect from my third rounders and my fourth rounders. I need you to come in. I need if you're going to be if we draft a cornerback or a safety in a third round or fourth round, you have to be either a nickel or a dime, or you have to be a guy who we can count on to come in and start 3 or 4 games. That's where I'm at with third and fourth rounders. And the fifth through seventh rounders, well, those are backups. Like you say, if you can get a guy who's good on special teams, you're doing pretty good. I mean, you can get primary backups. You can get your second tight end in the fifth, sixth, or seventh round. You can get a tight end who's going to be your number two kind of guy. I mean, you hope you hit all of them out of the park, but as long as you can get quality depth, and what I mean by quality depth is, a backup or a special teamer. And for salary cap reasons, you have to have cheap players on your team. So a guy like DeMarco Jackson, quality depth. We got him in the fifth round. He's a good linebacker. In a couple of years, he's learned how to play the will and the middle. And yeah, he's had to come in and start a few games. He wasn't great, but he wasn't horrible. And if we needed DeMarco Jackson to come in and start a couple of games, I think everything would be okay. But he's really good depth because he can play multiple positions at the linebacker core. He can play in the middle, he can play at the will. And in the meantime, he's a force on special teams. Now, that kind of guy, good quality depth, that kind of guy isn't going to play himself into a $5 million a year contract. He's the kind of guy that is going to remain a $2, $3 million a year guy. And he's got to be good at multiple things. He's got to play multiple positions. He's got to be ready to start in a pinch. And he's got to be dominant on special teams. You get all that out of a fifth rounder, sixth rounder, seventh rounder, you're doing pretty good. So that's the kind of thing that keeps your salary cap alive. You hope that Bub Means at wide receiver, a fifth round pick last year, you hope that he develops into a great wide receiver. But if he's blowing up after his fourth year and he's doing great, yeah, you're going to have to pay that guy a lot of money. There's always a rotation. It's a revolving door. You can't ever keep the same players on your team. There's always going to be good guys leaving. And if we can get our salary cap in control, then, I think we have a way better chance of staying competitive, going out and getting guys when we need them, signing somebody, taking a chance on somebody. Isaac Yiadom, these 1 year contracts for like last year, Isaac Yiadom, or this year, Willie Gay. You sign a 1 year contract, $5 million. If Willie Gay's a great linebacker, then he's gonna want more money. Maybe our front office should say, hey, let's take a chance. Sign this guy. We don't know if he's going to be a great starter or not, but instead of signing him the 1 year, sign him the 3 years. We don't have the salary cap. We don't have the money for that right now. Those kind of things is what I'm talking about. You get Isaac Yiadom for $1 million. You could have had him for 2 years, 2 million, and he'd be on our team right now, and then deal with it later. It's like I said, we're playing this game right now where we're trying to save money and we're trying to build the best team we can. But you go and hit a home run like Lucas Patrick. He played so well at left guard to start that he was playing himself into a nice little contract with the Saints. Not a $10 million a year contract, but a $5, $6 million a year contract. I mean, I think the guy's making probably less than $3 million. But he got hurt, and now that he's back, if he stays healthy and he shows us these last 4 games that he's a solid starting left guard, then yeah, we're going to have to pay him more than we're paying him now. And if you had a little bit of room and salary cap uh, uh, freedom, you can re-sign guys like this. You can't have all pros everywhere. You're going to have to take your lump somewhere. And with this team, in the condition we're in right now, it's probably going to take 3 years before we're a functional team again. I think In a couple of years, when the salary cap's under control, first of all, we have to control the spending like we did this year. Don't extend a bunch of players to try. Don't go to the bank of car to try to make free agency moves next year. I mean, if you're strapped for cash and you have to, otherwise you can't even pay a rookie draft class, then yeah, you might have to dip into the bank of car. And that's what I call it, the bank of car, because that's what we did with Drew Brees. We're always restructuring his contract, and he was willing to do it. And we didn't mind having this generational quarterback on our team forever. So we made roster moves all the time, going to the bank of Breeze. Well, the bank of Carr is a totally different bank. Nobody wants to dip into the bank of Carr to force him to stay here longer than need be. All right. We keep him next year. Maybe we keep him 1 year after that. Whatever it takes for this contract to run out, and then we just let him go. And I think we should be happy we have Derek Carr until it's all settled because you could do worse. You could do worse. You might not think so, but you could do worse. Check out my video on what should the Saints do at quarterback, and we go through the free agents for quarterback next year. We go through all the quarterbacks in the league. We go through quarterbacks in the draft to try to determine where Derek Carr actually exists. And in my opinion, he's not in the top 20 in the league, but he's better than the other 12. Okay. I would rather have Derek Carr than any free agent quarterback we might have a chance at getting next year. It's just the way it is. I don't like playing that kind of game with the quarterback position, but this franchise is rebuilding. I don't know. I don't know if you want to go and get a young guy and throw him into the mix on a really bad team. You know, we're watching Carolina do that with Bryce Young right now. People aren't even sure if Bryce Young is going to make it or not. Most people think he's not, and he's starting to look a little better of late. The team's playing a little better of late. And if the team gets better and you build around him, I think Bryce Young gets better as the team gets better. But yeah, it's a tough one. That's a tough one. I'm not sure how we address quarterback. I think I personally I would just stick with Carr for the next year or two and try to build a good team, try to get a young team. The salary cap is the issue. I think we should let these older players' contracts play out. Don't extend no one else. And in 2 years, we're going to have Cam Jordan off the books, Derek Carr off the books, Demario Davis off the books, Tyron Matthew off the books, and we'll have a lot of extra money. And until then, you need a team, and I think you should build in the draft. We have 8 picks this year. I think 10 would be great. So I would trade down once and try to pick up extra picks. And I would follow this list and I would go about it that way. The thing about the Saints is we have so many positions of need that you almost can't miss. I mean, you can probably get a tight end in the 7th round, and he's going to come in here and compete with Dallin Holker. I mean, Jawan Johnson's going to be a free agent. He's not the greatest starting tight end anyway. None of them run block good enough for me. So you get a good run blocking tight end in the 6th round, and he can definitely make this team. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. The offensive line. We're so bad at the offensive line at several positions that you just grabbing anybody and you hope you're thinking, okay, there's a chance. I'm not talking about Ezram, the guy in the 7th round that we drafted that never played tackle, but only 2 years his whole life. This guy's been on our practice squad the whole time. This monster, if there's any hope that this monster can turn into a starting caliber NFL player, then hey, maybe we have a guy at tackle already. Way too young to just come out of the gates doing it now. Might not see this guy progress for years. He was, I think, playing defensive tackle. He only played offensive tackle 2 years. But we draft him in the 7th round because of potential. And he's on our practice squad. And maybe this guy actually develops into something. You know, you never know, but we got to take our shots. But anyway, offensive line is a position where I'm thinking, no, you get a guy in the 3rd round or 4th round, and he should compete with Nick Saldivari. You know, he should be able to compete with Oludo or Landon Young. Landon Young, who was a 6th round pick. You know, so Yeah, there's a chance you stock up on draft picks, you build a young, cheap team, and at least for the next 4 years, if you have a couple of good drafts, you'll get that salary cap, managed. And then hopefully the chance presents itself to go and get the players that are going to turn this franchise around. Quarterback is definitely one of them that we're going to need. I don't think you mess with the future right now to try to move up in this particular draft to get one of these quarterbacks. Deion Sanders kid or Cam Newton light. No, I'll pass. I'd rather take a chance on Drew Aller or Jackson Dart if I'm going to throw a dart at a board and oh, okay, let's go with that one. He's better than Carr. Let's go with him. If that's going to be my frame of mind, then yeah, I'm not trading away 3, 4 future draft picks so I can move up and get Deion Sanders kid. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing that for anybody. I'll pass. I don't think this draft is all that. I see players in the middle of the first round who I want for this team so desperately that I'm not going to give away 3, 4, 5 picks in the future to go and move up to get somebody that's slightly better. That's just the way I feel. There's at least 20 players in this draft that I'd be happy with taking in the first round. I'm not giving away and moving up to go and get one particular guy. I mean, the guy that I'm in love with is Tyler Warren at tight end, Ashton Genty at running back. We have Alvin Kamara for 2 years. I'm not packaging 4 picks to move up and get Ashton Genty. It's probably going to be a great running back in this league. Whoever gets Ashton Genty is going to hit a home run. I'm not even willing to package to move up and get him. I'll package. I'll let a quarterback fall to me. I'll let one of these guys fall to me. Whenever the Saints draft pick comes up this year in the first round, there's a few players that'll be so good. I'm gonna be happy they're there, and I'm gonna grab them. Fuwango was a perfect example last year. I wouldn't have minded trying to move down 2, 3 spots, and I'd have taken my chances somewhere else to pick up additional picks last year. But Fuwango was a good player, fell in our laps, and there's going to be good players in this draft outside of the top 10. Like I say, we're probably going to lose out now that Carr's hurt, and we're going to end up with a top 10 pick anyway. So this is it. I just like talking about football and the draft, and I thought this was an interesting examination. I'm hoping that the Saints can hit on our draft picks, and if we end up with a couple of good starters, a couple of good rotational pieces, a couple of good backups, some quality, cheap depth, regardless. Cheap depth is something that this team really needs. Regardless of how great they are, we're not performing very well now. But I would rather have a bunch of young, cheap guys on my team over the next couple of years as I'm resetting the salary cap than a bunch of overpriced, overaged veterans who we're watching deteriorate right before our eyes. So that's all I got. I love talking about the draft. I love talking about the Saints. Subscribe to Rosenfield 10 for more videos about the Saints. I am your friend or your coworker. And if you want to talk about the Saints, leave a comment. Let me know how you feel. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Who dat?